Well, welcome to Something to Say Lessons Learned, Lessons Ahead. I'm Jo Medlin, President of the Australian Council for Adult Literacy, and I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on many traditional lands and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Today, I'm really happy to introduce Mary Wallace from LWA. I've known Mary for well over a decade through her work in verifying programs that I've been on, and nowadays through ACAL and the work that we do that LWA, often intersect with. And Mary, welcome. And would you like to start by telling us about the role of LWA?
Oh, yes, sure, certainly. If it's okay, I'll share my screen and bring up a little PowerPoint to make it a bit more interesting, maybe, to listen to the role of LWA.
That sounds lovely. Thanks, Mary.
All right. So LWA's role is to respond to changes and needs in the adult LL&D educational field. So responsiveness is really overarching in everything we do. So LWA is a 30-plus-year-old RTO, and in our history, we've delivered accredited training, workplace English language and literacy programs, and developed resources for the vet sector. But we're probably best known for our quality assurance or QA role, and that's for the Skills for Education and Employment program, or the C program, and also for the Adult Migrant English program, or the AMEP. So we're the service provider for those two departments. That's the Department of Education, Skills and Employment, and the Department of Home Affairs. But we are also responding to the needs of the service providers that we work with. So we really respond to these two very big stakeholders in these programs. So for the department, we're providing those quality assurance services, as I said, professional development workshops, training sessions, we have resource development. We also provide the secure website that assessment tasks and resources are housed on, and other support materials. We work on our communications with service providers and the department to ensure there's transparencies in all the processes. And we also do research as required to inform future policy and support practice. But one of the biggest things we do is to discuss ideas to further support the program, service providers, and the department. For the service providers, we also respond to them by providing feedback on their materials and processes. We often conduct moderation sessions on student responses to that supports assessor practice. We answer queries to ensure we have shared understanding, and we provide any support as required. We conduct cross provider validation sessions, and that helps them create summative assessment tasks that are ASQA compliant. We're currently hosting some curriculum community of practice meetings, and that supports that curriculum delivery in the field. But again, one of the big things we do is discuss ideas to support the program and to support service providers. So those are a couple of things that LWA do to be responsive to the field. Now, everyone will recognize this new photo of COVID-19, and COVID-19 really showed a really good example of the responsiveness that we needed to have. Suddenly, delivery went from face-to-face to non-face-to-face. Now, whether that was mail-outs remotely or online with Zoom or some other type of platform, we had to respond. So we responded very much by right away moving any PTA, pre-training assessment, or IA, initial assessment kits, to mail out or an online platform so that the enrollments could continue during this time. That meant students could use their mobile phones, their laptops, their computers to continue to engage with the system, and teachers can continue to bring these students in. We also conducted some workshops talking about online practice and assessment practices online, so delivery could continue for the teachers. Doesn't mean it was easy, heaven knows, but at least we got together to discuss these type of practices. But LWA, of course, also had to respond and look at our own practices. So we had to look at what are we doing? So we moved our PD sessions online and started to record them so that they would be available for access anytime for the field. So this type of responsiveness is really what LWA's role is about.
It was certainly a learning curve for all of us last year, wasn't it?
Good heavens, yes. And sometimes it felt like you were really working hard to try to catch up and get in front. So we really were looking at ways, what is the best way to support, trying to be innovative and look at what can be done. The field's so wide, varied, and diverse, it can be quite difficult to offer services that meet the needs of each provider.
And so, Mary, as I said in the beginning, I think we've known each other for well over a decade, I would say. How did you start in adult literacy, and how did you come to work for LWA? Because sorry to say, I've never actually asked you that before.
Yeah, well, we don't often talk about these things that sit behind the work that we do we? Well, when I was in my 20s working in my BA, I had the opportunity to study in Japan. And when I went over to Japan, that's when I really began to examine the culture and the language. Who am I? Why am I? How did the US and the culture and customs there help inform who I've become? And how do I express myself? How does English work in the way that we express ourselves? And this really made me start to look at the impact of culture and language in who we are. So when I came back and completed my BA, I entered the workforce at Honda, and I became a bilingual engineer overseeing the new model startup. And that gave me quite a bit of exposure to the manufacturing field. But while I was in Japan, I'd had the opportunity to do some casual teaching, and I really enjoyed the rapport that occurs with a teacher and a student, and I missed that. So I decided to go back and complete a graduate diploma in TESOL. And when I completed that graduate diploma in TESOL, I went overseas to South Korea to apply that and to continue teaching. And that gave me quite a few years of experience there. I came back to the US to complete a master's, and it was while I was doing my master's I had the opportunity to enter into the adult literacy field and teaching composition. And I loved the rapport that you had with these adult students. The knowledge and experience they brought with them into the classroom really challenged me and helped me grow as well. There was a type of symbiotic relationship that occurred between me and the students where they were learning and so was I. And I really loved that dynamic. When I relocated to Australia, I had the chance to work in a neighborhood house, and that was quite good, applying my skills here in Australia and learning about Australian culture, and of course, some nuanced Australian language and spelling, which is quite different. And I hadn't really encountered all the different spellings that could occur. And as I was working, I saw an advertisement for Linda Wise and Associates, and it was to work with Linda Wise and Associates at Toyota in their Open Learning Center. So I applied for that job, and it was really quite a good fit because it called on my manufacturing background, my Japanese language skills, as well as all my educational qualifications. So I worked in the Cert 2 automotive package creating units for their workforce while trying to create materials using the, as they called it, Toyota way, but remaining sensitive to the language needs of that workforce, very diverse. So that was quite a nice little challenge. And then with Linda Wise and Associates, I also had the opportunity to work on a couple of programs, and again apply manufacturing experience that I had to these developing of these materials, much a range of resource development, conduct some mapping activities with curriculum to the different reporting tools. And at one point, I got this sense about these quality assurance or verification role that LWA had. So I asked about that and moved into the verification role, starting first with the National Reporting System. And then as the ACSF was developed and designed, I helped Linda Wise and Associates work on the ACSF rollout and the use of that reporting tool in the field. So that gave me quite a bit of experience, just growing and learning across the programs, moved through the organization and to where I am today. So it's an example of working very much from the ground up in a company.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really interesting, for people to hear that, Mary, because sometimes you have, people come in to verify you and you feel like they're sort of checking on you and you do think, well, you know what, why are you able to check up on me? I think hearing your background is really interesting and valuable to anyone that, you're working with. So LWA, you're really in a unique position, I think, and it must seem to LLN specialists that they are being judged by other specialists. How do you ensure that you get experienced staff? And then how do you maintain this balance of professional respect for teachers that you verify?
Yeah, that's quite a very good question, actually, a very, very good question. Um, so LWA is actually very, very lucky in that we're in a very privileged position of being able to work with a range of service providers across the country. So we get to interact with teachers and assessors with a range of skills and experience. It's such a valuable experience for us. And we are at times approached by individuals that express an interest in working with the company. And this is a great asset to LWA because that allows us to draw on a range of the experiences from the field. So we get staff that have worked at large organizations, staff that have worked at very small organizations, some that have worked in upper management, and some that are directly from the coalface teaching and assessing in the program. And it's this range of experience on the team that allows us to give quite a knowledgeable response to the department and to the service providers. But you're quite right about skills and experience. And it's very interesting that when we look at a team member, who are we going to ask to come on board with LWA? Who is a good fit with the company? Qualifications are necessary. That's stipulated in our contract, as is experience. So those two things are givens. But the biggest thing is about the qualities of the person that comes on board. We need qualities such as self-reflection, humility, a pursuit of lifelong learning, because one of the best things, as I mentioned earlier about working with adults, whether it's in the classroom or in the workforce, is that symbiotic relationship of learning with and from each other. And that's really true in our role as well. As we do quality assurance work, it's essential that we acknowledge the skills and experience in the material we see and the people that sit behind that material. And we also must be very aware of our own skills and knowledge and any of the limitations, because that's what, in doing so, we open ourselves up to learn from each other. It's really, really important that we are looking at when we give feedback to a service provider to support their continuous improvement. We get feedback from the service provider as well, and that supports the quality assurances, services, and processes. So it's very much about growing capabilities in the field. And I need staff members that understand that and are comfortable working with that.
And because I can remember um, years ago, having some very robust conversations with verifiers, you included, challenging what you had said about our materials and the levels that we'd allocated to people, particularly because we were working in distance education and one of the few providers who were. So, and we were quite feisty, I suppose.
Yes,
Would you
yes,
like to say
you had
feisty?
quite an experienced team.
Yeah, so we didn't take feedback quietly, um, but now looking back from this distance, it does occur to me that although at the time we found it quite confronting, it certainly caused us to become a team who talked a lot about what we were doing, the theory behind things. We really became a group of people working together who not just looked at the micro of what we were doing, but that whole big picture thing and how our practices related to what we saw as best practice. And I think it caused us to become, well, certainly for me, looking back, I think that whole process of stimulating that professional conversation all the time in our workplace, in in conjunction with doing a master's degree and other things that I did like that, really have probably led me to be sitting here today interviewing you, because we have thought so much about what we're doing and why, and how it should change. But I did take on board Philippa's idea that a lot of teachers have lost confidence. And I just wondered how you respond to that and whether you see the same, because, looking back from my position now, I can see how it assisted. But if you're the person being verified now and feeling that what you're doing is being judged, it might be a long time to wait to see the benefits of that.
That's right. It's very much like I said a couple slides back. It's not so much about a staff member's qualifications or their experience. It's about their qualities. And so it's very important that when you're discussing professional practice, that you're discussing it in a manner that allows for, as I said, that symbiotic relationship, the give and take, the feedback. So it's very much about not what's wrong and right according to our perspective. It's about what's wrong or right according to what do we all feel is best practice in program delivery. Now, we've had feedback from providers where they very much do like the verification, because sometimes, particularly for large providers, for instance, this is one example, they have quite a few teachers in the field, teachers and assessors in the field, and there might be times when there is practice that they'd like to get feedback on or give feedback on, and it's helpful for them to get the feedback from an external party and not just within their own organization. So at times yes, there can be tricky situations where we come in and we do help support the field in creating sort of an even practice or what is best practice and get that discussion out there. But it's important it's done in a manner that it feels safe and constructive, and that it's one where we're all discussing it. It's not just a one-way discussion. Because as I said, we're a privileged position. We get to see a lot of things in the field, which really helps the breadth of our experience, to give suggestions and ideas. But we need to be open to looking for further suggestions and ideas. And those come from the ground up and come from the field. So it's very important that the manner in which you hold your discussions feels comfortable. Doesn't mean they can't get robust, as you said before, with your distance learning. There's many knowledgeable people in the field, and the discussions will get robust. And it's okay to have possible differences of opinion, and you decide, though, how you're going to reconcile it. And it's more for what's the best for the program or for that context, that deliverer, that person delivering that service. With the distance learning, your context was quite unique. you didn't have that face-to-face component. And of course, we have to take that context on board as we're discussing things with you. What we might discuss with you would completely not have worked for another provider. So these are all things you take into account as you're discussing what is best for the delivery of the program and these ideas. So yes, it's an aspect that can have I suppose it can be viewed uncomfortably if you feel that you're being judged right or wrong. But if you're thinking of it more just about this is an opportunity to discuss what is the best way going forward, then people feel comfortable coming on board to have that discussion. And then that's the manner in which we want to approach it. What's the best way of doing things? To support continuous improvement, are there improvements that we can have? And this is always a discussion that occurs as opposed to a one-way feedback session.
It's a really interesting topic, isn't it?
It's
Thank you
hard to
for
get,
that.
it's very sensitive. You have to it's a very difficult thing to do that you do, it will not be constructive if people are offside.
That's right. That's right. It really is about how you approach it, isn't it?
Correct.
And
Yes.
I take what you said about you're in a very unique position and you see a lot of, um, literacy practices across the country. And so I'm thinking at the moment, we've got all these things going on. So you would have your fingers on the pulse of literacy, particularly I would think for job seekers, given the nature of the programs that you're working in. So can you share with us what you've learned about where we are at in terms of meeting the needs of that cohort of learners?
Yes, yes, you are right. We are in a very unique position. And one thing that I and LWA the field understands, and the field would understand this very well, that learners are not just job seekers. We need to respond to the learners as whole individuals, that they are participants in the community. They're ongoing learners and not just job seekers, that they are varied, as many individuals as there are in the classroom. The language, literacy, and numeracy digital skills needs need to be addressed uniquely for each job seeker. And that's the challenge, how to teach to the needs of the individuals when working with a group in the classroom. So often the needs of industry are also important because that can signal where employment opportunities may lie. And there's a report, the National Skills Commission puts out an annual Australian jobs report, and it does note different jobs, and it notes these jobs by industry, it notes the jobs by occupation, and it notes the jobs by location. And this is valuable information for educational providers. But we must not let this report or similar information solely dictate the literacy learning needs of the job seeker. Not all learners want the jobs required by a particular industry or by a particular occupation or location. In programs that have classes made up of a range of learner, and that's for instance in the C program, you've got this range of learners together. They're not together necessarily industry specific. It's really important in these classrooms that core skills are taught holistically, and you focus on transferable skills, skills which each individual can apply to the needs of their chosen job. It's important to remember that these core skills underpin all the skills that an employer is looking for. And it's the focus on building these skills, which are needed by every job seeker, that should remain front and center in the teaching. Now, with the introduction of the Foundation Skills Training Package, the development of foundation skills has been given an employment focus in the classroom. and this is becoming then an employment focus at a group level. And we're in this classroom with a variety of individual pathways. So the employment focus in this type of classroom can often take an industry needs focus with tasks and activities addressing the needs of a particular industry, such as childcare or aged care. And these can be issues that erode the broad development of the foundation skills. And that's a little bit concerning. And then you have the fact that the qualification requirements in the FSK can often leave these teachers and assessors poorly equipped to accommodate the breadth and depth of knowledge that all these individuals need. And they are not able to address that range of skills that are needed in the classroom. And it makes it very difficult when you've got this particular tool that you're delivering in this diverse classroom setting and needing a workplace sort of context. It's more helpful when the FSK is delivered as designed to support a particular vet training package. So it's important to understand that foundation skill development should be delivered by teachers with the qualifications in adult literacy and numeracy, and that understand the integration of the holistic core skill tuition and the importance of transferring these skills for the student for their context. It's sometimes get lost that people think of the job seeker status as front and center, but that status should not outweigh the fundamental skill development of the individual as a whole to be able to work in the community and in their life.
I'm really pleased to hear you say that, Mary, and I think that that absolutely reflects, you know, ACAL's position, definitely, that, you know, we do have concerns about the breadth of provision, you know, and making sure that it's not just focused on a job for you in here and that's where you belong, but giving people the opportunity to be everything that they can be in their life. It's so important, and literacy underpins all of that.
That's right. It strengthens everything, doesn't it? Not just the job aspect, but your ability to help your child in school, your ability to maybe join a club, a sporting club in the community. All these things are very important for the well-being of the individual.
Well, that's right, and that social equity, that and that the value to the whole society for every person that can engage more effectively. It sometimes seems to be a little bit overlooked. Although hopefully not being overlooked, because we have so many things going on at the moment. So
that's right. That's right.
You know,
There's a few initiatives occurring and some data collection happening right now, I think.
well, that's right. And, you know, the effects of COVID really, I think, brought adult literacy issues out into the public spotlight. So, you know, we have the parliamentary review, we have vet review, we have foundation skills review. So what do you hope we see for the future of literacy for adults in Australia?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's can be quite broad, can't it? So what I do hope is that we do something a little different. So I certainly hope that we get the opportunity to move beyond just such strict competency-based training structures. It would be nice to move outside maybe of that sort of competency-based structure. The training packages, performance criteria, and assessments needed for learning a trade are not necessarily a good fit for learning a language or learning literacy or learning numeracy and that broad skill base. So I hope the adult literacy field is able to respond and experiment with some new structures for learning these core skills. And the foundation skills for your future program, which many of your members will be familiar with, it's nice to see a slightly new government initiative. While it's many people compare it to the WELL program. It does differ a little bit in that you can incorporate non-accredited training into your program as you design it. So it does allow the provider to take their hands in and design the program and what they feel would meet the best needs of their student. Now, it does tend to have that kind of employment focus, but again, I like the fact that they're letting the providers experiment and step outside of just your accredited training structures and take a foray into some different type of training structures. I think that's going to be quite interesting to watch and keep the finger on the pulse of how that goes. How do they design their programs? How do they write their training units? That'll be quite interesting to have a look at, I think. So I think that's the type of responsiveness you need to have a look at. How can you respond to the needs of the learners, their environment, and build more flexibility into the current training structures to allow that sort of responsiveness to occur? And one of the way in experimenting with new structures could mean could mean moving beyond the current frameworks, such as your ACSF, your which is Australian Core Skills Framework, or your CSFW, your Core Skills for Work, or your DLSF, even Digital Literacy Skills Framework, which is also a nice framework introduction. It would be nice if outcomes weren't only framed in those hard skills, but maybe that introduce or take a look at frameworks that also measure some soft skills, such as confidence, participation, emotional management. If all of these things could also be invited into the adult literacy learner landscape, it's possibly they would complement the hard skill development as well. So it would really be nice if we could get a little messy and take forays out of the things we know and move into some areas that could be explored, I think.
I love that idea, Mary, because I mean, let's face it, anyone working in adult literacy knows that those soft skills, when you see those developing, that's what, keeps you passionate. That's why this is a life, being an adult literacy teacher, not just a job, because it's the soft skill development that's so important and that you see underpinning everything else and all the
That's
other
right.
skill
That's
development.
right. It's
Mm.
completely right. And they in turn get reflected in the hard skill development, don't they? So, that they build and get reflected. And that's when you see some of those hard skill gains. So it is important to acknowledge, because how many teachers, over the years, if only we were able to measure these things: confidence, showing up on time every day, that sort of punctuality, that responsiveness, those sort of things. There'd be a lot of gains that could be measured.
Yeah, they sure would. Thank you, Mary. It's been lovely talking to you. Appreciate all your insights into the work of LWA and sharing
Thank
your
you.
own personal story with us. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Joe.